So I think Ambassador Mamabolo will try to 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 develop which Africa are we going to leave to the next generations. Which Africa do we want? I think with the African Union has put on a very ambitious vision, 2063, the 50 years ahead. Which Africa do we want to leave to the next generations? Ambassador Mamabolo will have almost this responsibility to tell the future. No. I'm not talking about the youth is no longer the future. They are the present. I think we are corrected exactly in Malabo when a young person came and correct the heads of state, but they don't want anymore to be called the future. They are the present because they have to learn how to manage the continent before we leave the legacy to them. So it is the responsibility I give to Ambassador Mamabolo, who prior to his current position as PR of South Africa, he was High Commissioner to Nigeria since 2009, appointed his country's special envoy to the Great Lakes region in 2006. The Great Lakes region is in Africa, not because we have also Great Lake regions in this side of the world, so it's in Central Africa. He was subsequently named the deputy facilitator of the Burundi peace process. In 2002, Mr. Mamabolo was appointed special envoy of the Organization of the African Unity, OAU, at the time, in Sierra Leone and the Mano River, a position he held for 2 years. Also in 2002, he was appointed Deputy Director General for African Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of South Africa, responsible for overall coordination and management of bilateral and multilateral relations in Africa. With a foreign service career dating back to 1978, Mr. Mamabolo was appointed Deputy Head of the African National Congress Mission to the United Republic of Tanzania at the age of 23. Mr. Mamabolo holds a graduate diploma in social sciences from the Moscow School of Social Sciences, a diploma in journalism from the Harare Polytechnic, and a master's degree in public administration from the University of Pretoria. So, Ambassador Mamabolo, it's a long way. We want a long future, actually.
Gives me a great honor indeed to be among such a distinguished panelist, and of course, indeed, addressing such a distinguished audience. Let me say Ambassador Ndong MBA has really summarized everything. I think I was about to say, yes, indeed, I agree. Maybe we should move to question time. Because I think really, indeed, he's covered everything. And so I will not try and repeat the same things, otherwise I will be boring you. Let me try and make some observation, particularly on some of the issues that he has raised. We have this rich history. The question, of course, arises, why then is Africa still lagging behind? That is the question that we need to answer, a question that Africa has the responsibility to answer, but I would dare say a question that the international community also must answer. I look at this as an obligation, not just of Africa, but an obligation of the international world as well. And that is why we're here at the United Nations, negotiating, hopefully, possibly, an international framework which would ensure that we agree as to the way forward as we address developmental issues, which would ensure that we agree on how to move forward, that we can attend and take out some of the countries in Africa who continue to be in very terrible situations of poverty, critically so. How do we develop that international framework? As I said, it's a responsibility of all of us. I think Dr. Idris Bar has mentioned some of the few issues. Education, we need to educate our people. We need governance, we need transparency. And we agree to all that. Sometimes there is this debate in the international community, and sometimes we disagree really when we shouldn't be disagreeing. And the negotiations become very difficult. Sometimes we actually become suspicious. Even people tell us you need transparency and good governance, and we say, why do you bring those ones? Are those ones our priority? What about the other ones? What about the bread and butter issues? What about this one? But let me tell you, from Africa, all those issues that you have addressed, we agree are very key and are very important. What are the challenges that we face? I have my own theory. The one theory is that we can't remove away our past, colonial past. And I always say, what would have happened if Africa was left intact in terms of unity? What would have happened that if we had had the kind of colonialism that China had, where they remained intact as one, despite the fact that you may have a different version of Chinese here and there and so on and so on, but they remained China. We didn't. We became fragmented. We became South Africans also, Namibia, and Nigeria, and so on and so on. Different language, different national anthems and flags. So the question of unity, very key. I can tell you, if we had been left in that sphere, we would have been a power today to reckon with. A power alongside China and many others that were not colonized in the same manner as we did. Of course, I know the argument would be, let's not keep going back to the past. What are we doing now? What are we improving that situation? I am saying to you that that is a factor, also an important factor, which has brought us far behind in terms of the development. The topic today is about Africa and its own problems, Africa finding its own solution. It is a notion, as far as I'm concerned, and what Ambassador Ndong was saying, that symbolizes what do we do about this paradigm shift that he was talking about. How do we move as Africa from beggar mentality to an outlook that is proactive and self-assured? It is a notion that challenges the leadership of the people of the continent to take ownership of the development challenges that are facing the continent. And it is a notion that seeks to instill a drive towards finding a home-brewed answers and solutions to ensure that poverty, sustainable development, industrialization, drought, food production, and disease, while simultaneously investing in capacity building, consolidate the continent's self-reliance. Ladies and gentlemen, the program before you now, program at the level of the United Nations, is that by 2015, we would be evolving a program that talks to post-2015 development agenda. We would have looked at what we have had so far in terms of the MDGs. Those MDGs, I don't want to explain a lot, I'm sure you've been following, were meant to energize developing countries, Africa in particular and the others, to ensure that we do indeed address in a very significant manner issues of development. We have reached a stage where we are making an assessment. Have we done enough? And clearly, as we move towards 2015, which is meant to be the deadline, not the deadline of the MDGs. MDGs will continue. There'll always be a question about poverty. There'll always be a question of whether we have done enough in education, whether we have industrialized enough, and so on. But the target that we have set ourselves, have we done enough? And so we are evolving a program which hopefully will take that onto account. All this talk about sustainable development goals. Let me give you our take. Our take is that whatever program comes up, yeah. Thank you. Whatever program that comes up, should take into account the eradication of poverty as being central. We are very cautious and very worried about moving to something that we don't know called this sustainable development, when we have agreed commitments on what is called the MDGs. This is something that the international community has sat down on and has agreed. And so as we move to the next step, we want to be sure that we don't leave this one behind and hang on to something that has neither here nor there. Whereas we also recognize, of course, that it is important to make sure that those MDGs, which were 8 or so, are not enough. We need to add to them. We need to look at issues such as energy. We need to look at issues such as industrialization. We need to look at issues such as technology and so on, which may not have been well covered. Or if they were covered by the MDGs, may be covered in a rather weak manner. Maybe we need to strengthen the agreements that were done in 2000 to ensure that as we move forward, we have very strong agreement and an international framework that ensures that indeed we do address the development problems of Africa. On the economic side, let me say, you will hear a lot about the debate on whether aid is important as we talk about financing this program. And our position is, yes, indeed, aid is important, very important. My understanding is that there are some countries in Africa today which would collapse if you remove that aid. You have countries, commitments that were made by the international committee, like, for example, 0.7% of their GNI would be towards aid. We don't want to lose all that, because it is important that I say some countries you may find that maybe part of their budget depends on that aid. But we also would be very silly in Africa if we were to believe that that aid would be sufficient to cover all our development programs. And so, in addition to the aid, we would want to look at alternative means of ensuring that we finance and support this development program. In Africa, we therefore rally around our own programs, like NEPAD. And we ask the international community to get involved in ensuring, as I said, it's an obligation of all of us, that NEPAD does succeed. We look at how we can be supported by foreign direct investment, how we can look at ICT, as I said, transport, transboundary water networks to boost intra-African trade and stimulate growth. These and other opportunities are aimed at creating and seizing opportunities to effect structural transformation and inclusive growth of the continent economy. They are also meant to take advantage of the continent's economy and varied resources. There may be examples of what we can do ourselves outside what the international community can do. And let me give one or two of them. Part of our problem may be capacity. Some countries would have a problem of collecting taxes, for example, and will not have enough capacity to collect. Now, I know from the experience of South Africa that if you are efficient in collecting your taxes, I'm just giving an example, there are many of them, you are able to support your own infrastructure. The money that you accumulate by way of insurance money and so on can be used for infrastructure. In fact, in the collaboration in the continent as a whole, we are able to say, what are we doing about this pension money that is lying there? Why don't we build bridges and so on right across the continent to ensure that we address problems of what you call. There's also a problem that Africa is looking at, the illicit flow of capital. It is a huge problem for us. There are figures which are not accurate. They will tell you in Africa we are losing about 50 billions a year. It just goes. That gets lost. And which makes nonsense even of this claim that we keep talking about ODA. when money that is about 3 times, 4 times, just leaves the continent through corruption, through many other issues you have in Africa. And the corruption is both internal and international. Big companies, huge companies would come there and not really declare. You have companies every year that keep on saying, we didn't make profit this year. And yet for the next 5 years, they're not making profit, but those companies do not collapse. They thrive. They don't want to declare exactly what they have because then they would have to pay tax. You have countries in Africa genuinely which would say, okay, we will give you tax heaven. Come and build here for 5 years and we're trying to attract you to come to our country. And when you have done that, we start imposing tax on you. After 5 years, that company has changed names. It's no longer my company, it's some new people who are coming in. And so, as a result of that, a lot of money is leaving the continent, including, as I say, money that may come up from corrupt leaders and so on and so on. So the international framework we would have to formulate around the issue of the illicit flow of capital would necessitate the cooperation of both the national and the international community. There are many other issues that we can talk in relation to that, which I think Ambassador Mba has talked about. In short, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our quest in Africa to try and improve and make us ready is to strive for integration, both politically and economically. There's the issue of peace and security, which is also on the agenda. Are we going to have peace and security as a goal or not? As we move forward, I see the Peace Institute deals with such issues as peace and security. And we say, yes, indeed, peace and security continues to be a very important aspect of our development. There are different versions. Some people will talk about peaceful societies that we want to create. And we also talk about peace and security insofar as it relates to conflict resolution, etc., etc. But in short, before I sit down, let me say we agree with you that there is a lot that we need to do in terms of education. I will not go into that. I think Ambassador Mbang has done that. There's a lot that we need to do around the health issues. Malaria, HIV continues to be a problem. There's a meeting in August in Washington in which President Obama will be inviting a number of African presidents. These kind of meetings which discusses around the issues of how we collaborate moving forward. There are a number of meetings which Ambassador Mbang has talked about, which relates to the EU and so on. Our program director here has said, don't we need the international community? Yes and no. We need to be accountable ourselves to ensure that we take the initiative. We need to make sure that we don't sit and wait for money that comes from us outside, but begin to generate our own money as well. But we also need to commit the international community to say, what do we do about all this? All of us need to ensure that Africa gets out of this. If you look in history, you would agree with me that even what we call the Asian tigers did not on their own just simply come out of that situation. They needed a whole lot of injection in terms of capital to ensure that they can be where they are. Africa would need that. I don't want to repeat what he has said, but let me say simply, this is the time for Africa. We should make sure that when those opportunities come, we talk about all this progress, about out of the 10 countries in the world, 6 of those who are having a very healthy growth in terms of what you call GDP and so on, are in Africa. There are countries in Africa, Nigeria, for example, which I think for the past 10 years or so has had a consistent GDP for about 6-7 years, consistent. And many of those countries that we're saying are the fastest growing today in Africa are having those kind of examples. So we have good stories to tell about Africa. We need to make sure that we transform all that into reality. Part of it is still a challenge. It's not easy, as we are describing here, because sometimes even that growth may be based on, say, for instance, natural resources, oil, and so on. If we're basing ourselves on a growth of that nature, you know that can never be long-lasting. It cannot be long-lasting. All it does, it gives you an opportunity to look at differentiating, at looking at other possibilities. It's not the and the final thing. You've got to make sure that we move. And so who then has the responsibility of ensuring that Africa does this? It's our own selves as Africa, with the international support. Thank you very much once again.